When they went to the Queen to tell her her subjects had no bread, do you know what she said?
Let them eat cake.
Here, take the bomb.
We're getting screwed, man. Every time we turn around, we're getting screwed. Oh, the revolution's going to be through podcasting for sure. That's the only way we talk. It's the little guys that take the brunt of everything. It's got to stop. Peasants, man. We're just peasants. Every one of us. You watch those old movies, you see the peasants in the background with the kings and queens walking around. We're those people. We're those people. I'm here, I swear. Hey, everybody. Good morning, peasants. Okay, I need a sound check, you guys, because I am flying solo today. So if I can get a sound check, that would be really, really great, because I have no idea if you guys can hear me or not. Hello, YouTube. Tiffany and Carlito. John Attakas, good morning. Fraser, great morning in Boise. Looks like it's foggy there. Carlitos, we're hoping to vote out Abbott out of office today. Got a primary for him. Do you have a quality candidate to replace him? That's the real question there. Welcome, welcome, everybody. John Attakas says 5 by 5. That is great. That means my sound is good. I had to ask him about that a long time ago. Apparently, that's some military phrase for your sound's good. So anyways, thank you, John Attakas. I appreciate it. Okay, you guys, I know why you're here. I know why you show up every morning bright and early at 6:30 a.m. It's for the dopamine hit of the day. It's the simultaneous sip. All you need is a cup or a mug, a glass, a tankard, a chalice, a stein, a canteen, a jug or flask. I don't have Ron to laugh at me as I mess my way up through this. A vessel of any kind, fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better, the simultaneous sip. But don't go too fast, because I have something that I need to share with you guys. Let's do it. Here we go. Oh, the days of old, back when we had a president that was crazy. If Trump's not crazy, of course. Okay, let's see. No sound on the president. You had no sound on the president. Well, I don't even know how to stop sharing that screen at this moment, because how would I do that? How would I go about doing this? There we go. That worked, sort of. Okay, guys. Well, what he said was we have to stop the terrorist killers. And then he said, now watch me make this drive. So you would have all laughed, I'm sure. Let me check my sound, because, of course, there's a million things that could be going wrong here. Okay. Output, external headphones, input. Okay. It should be working. Okay. So we've got to follow up on this story that's been going on with Iran. This is one of those big, big stories that we can not really get away with until the thing is completely resolved. And history will be talking about it for a long time. So if you want to be informed when you're telling your grandkids about when the United States toppled the Ayatollah, after we toppled the Shah and then installed the Ayatollah, now we've toppled the Ayatollah. Iran seems to have a really intermixed history with the United States and Britain specifically. But anyways, we want to be able to understand that, because someday our grandkids are going to ask, how did this current world order get started? And it started out like this. It started out kind of as a meme.
Ayatollah Khamenei is dead. This wretched and vile man, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead. This wretched and vile man, Ayatollah Khamenei.
All right, it doesn't get too much better than that, right? So Ayatollah Khomeini is dead, and the Iranians have announced it. Now, there was a little rumor that was running around that he wasn't dead and that he still was in charge. Sounds like that's not really the case. And I wanted to kind of start out a little bit talking about this right here. This is Javier Milei, and many of you guys know Javier Milei. He's the president of Argentina. And I've got like a couple different screens I have to grab every time I do this, so it's not going to be as smooth as when Ron's here. But this is Javier Milei. He says, power is a zero-sum game, and if we don't have it, then the left will have it. And that is something that I've been emphasizing a lot on this podcast, right? When it comes to power, when it comes to winning elections, it's a zero-sum game. What you do with that power is up to you, but you can't have power and not have power. The idea of power sharing agreements and stuff like that, it's kind of a farce. One person's got leverage over another person, and the power sharing agreement is just a way to convince you that you're not being run by a dictator or a monarch or something like that. And so Javier Milei clearly understands this. He's down there in Argentina, and they experimented with socialism. And when I say experimented, I mean nearly brought their country to the brink of collapse. In many ways, you could easily say that it did collapse. And Javier Milei was elected the day before I was sent to prison. And when he was elected, right, he ran on being essentially a libertarian candidate. But he's not a libertarian. He is a libertarian, like a social libertarian. But what he really is he's a fiscal conservative. He's a capitalist, a laissez-faire free trade capitalist. And obviously, we don't live in a country or live in a world where trade is quote unquote free. But if we all live through those ideals, I think the world would be a better place. But we don't. And trying to enforce those rules on people who are not subject, literally, it's not subject to those rules, you're going to end up with conflict, which is what we've had around the world with the nation states that haven't participated in the quote world order. So whether you like the world order or not, it is the way the system functions. Going after Iran and previous to that Venezuela, and prior to that in the first administration that Trump went after North Korea, he's changed the world order dramatically. And as you guys know, the Iranian regime was one of the most repressive regimes on the planet. There's no doubt about this, right? You can go look at just as early as the 1970s. You can go see their beaches. They've got bikinis. The women are liberated. It's obviously an Islamic culture, but it's a very progressive Islamic culture. After the Ayatollah was installed, he's a religious extremist, right? His brand of Islam caused women to wear full coverings, caused a lot of oppression. It was a rough spot. And you can tell by all the protests around the world, not just from the diaspora, the people that are spread out around the world that are Iranian, but also from the Iranians inside Iran themselves and now how they're responding to this attack. Imagine us, the United States of America, if we were being bombed, right? And if our president was killed and half of the White House, half of the Congress was killed and, the Pentagon was blown to smithereens, how would we react? I can promise you the way we would react would likely be a little bit different than the way these Iranian soccer players reacted yesterday. So this is the Iranian soccer team, and they played at the Asia Cup in Australia this week. During their match, when they played the Iranian national anthem, it's customary for them to sing along, just like it's customary for Americans, put their hand over their heart. If they're in uniform, they salute, and they do that whole number. Well, the Iranians, they sing along. And when they had this match yesterday, when the Iranian national anthem was being played, they didn't sing. This is actually a really, really significant thing. This is symbols, right? Symbols of defiance. These women are standing there and they're not honoring their country in the way they would have done just a week or two ago because they would have had the threat of reprisal if they didn't do it. This is the kind of stuff that for we peasants, we see this and we see that there's a liberated spirit here with these soccer players. It's pretty phenomenal, right? That change can happen. And at the same time, you have a lot of naysayers. You have a lot of naysayers out there talking about what our role and our function is in Iran. As peasants, we do and don't have a dog in this fight. I have nothing against those Iranian soccer players. I have nothing against the 92 million Iranians that live in Iran. I have nothing against a peasant anywhere on the planet. However, once you divide the peasants and the country, the land, where they live, where they're born, where the creator placed them, and you start drawing nation states, these are artificial boundaries. These are artificial, areas. And then, of course, the nation state requires defense because you drew a line. If you're going to draw a line in the sand, you have to defend it, and it goes on and on and on from there. So I've got nothing against the people of Iran, but when it comes to the nation state of Iran, their activities and their behaviors have affected my life. So now it becomes a matter of weights and measures. Have they affected my life enough for me to want and support my nation state to take action? This is the calculation we have to do. We have to calculate the future blowback. We have to calculate the past and how we got to the point we've gotten to. And we also have to be willing to cut ties with our own bad doings, correct things. Like there's a lot going on when we're trying to fix relationships with nation states. So to understand Iran, it's my opinion that to form a proper opinion about our intervention in Iran, you have to go back a little bit. And I don't mean to go back to the 70s and then even to 1919 or 1917, I don't remember which year that we installed the Shah. We don't want to go back that far, right? Two wrongs don't make a right, nothing like that. But just looking at today, how is my life today affected by Iran, the Iranian regime? So to understand that, we're going to step out of the international conflict and we're going to look domestically. We're going to look at a couple things that have come out, I believe, this week. None of this is new. For anybody who's followed the election stuff, none of this is new at all. So everything I'm showing, if you're a news junkie or you believe the election of 2020 was stolen and you've kind of followed all the different elements of that, this isn't necessarily new. But we now have publicly stated, some of this stuff has been put into court filings. It's been discovered through, proper parole evidence processes. And so the couple things I'm going to show you here are things that we now know for a fact. And now we, as peasants, have to take this input, this information, and do some calculations. So the first thing we're going to watch here is Cleta Mitchell. She was on with Steve Bannon on the War Room, and thank goodness for Steve Bannon. Despite his involvement with Epstein and blah, 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 thank goodness for Steve Bannon, because he has rallied the MAGA base and he has not forgotten about the core elements, the elections, right? National defense. There's these elements that kind of get lost with the pundits, and Steve Bannon has done a good job staying on top of it. So he had Cleta Mitchell on. She's the senior legal fellow for the Conservative Partner Institute, and she's been down in Georgia litigating the election fraud from 2020.
On October 16th, Fulton County ordered, October 16th of 2020, 3 weeks before the election, after the deadline for requesting an absentee ballot, by the way, under Georgia law, Fulton County ordered 1.6 million absentee ballots from their vendor, Runbeck, and they ordered those without envelopes. You cannot use an absentee ballot unless it's folded and put into an envelope. And one of the things that we had observers saying, and was part of our election contest in 2020, is that here are all these pristine ballots that have never been folded. They cannot possibly be real ballots. Now then, the petitioners, the county is coming in and they brought in some expert who was paid out of Zuckerbucks, I might add. He's from a left-wing group, and they have focused completely on these ballots. Why it doesn't matter that they've never been folded, that doesn't mean anything. Yes, it does. And we just want to make sure that we have those, that we are able to look at them, but they are desperate to get them back. So the judges ordered mediation. I don't know what that could possibly be, but I will tell you that I'm swinging into action here, even though I have no portfolio other than I just will make a pest of myself. But the state election board has subpoenaed those ballots. They're entitled to the ballots. They should be part of this case. I'm certainly going to make that argument to the Department of Justice that the state election board has voted to subpoena the ballots because they want to look at the ballots. There have been a lot of people who have seen ballot images. We want to make sure we keep the original ballots, but the ballot images have raised some very, very concerning information about changes, digital changes, dates changed on ballots to try to make it appear that they were received or processed before they actually were or after they actually were. So I just think this judge does not want to hear the case. I don't know why, but mediation is better than just granting what the petitioners have asked for, but it's worrisome.
So Georgia, just weeks before the election took place in 2020, ordered what was the number? 150,000 ballots without envelopes. Why would they order without envelopes? Because they were never going to be mailed. They were never going to be mailed. It's that simple. There's no other reason. A couple weeks prior to the election, you would order that many ballots without envelopes if you're going to mail them. You wouldn't do it because you'd need the envelope. So what were these ballots going to do? And did they show up in the election? Now, you go follow the case and you find out you've got whistleblowers saying we had unfolded pieces of paper running through the machines. There weren't envelopes to match the number of ballots until later when the dates got changed inside the system in order to pass the audits. Obviously, something's up in Georgia. Then we run up to Michigan, another one of these swing states, and we see more elements that all tie together. Oops, turned my camera off instead of share screen. So now we're going to listen to Patty McMurray. She's a Gateway Pundit contributor, so she's a journalist, and she's been following this story up in Michigan. And we're going to listen to a couple minutes of this about how not only in Georgia, for example, right, put it all together. If this election is being tampered with at a high level, okay, there's going to be some commonalities. As Patrick Burns says, there's like 13 ways to cheat on the elections. And in this county, 1, 7, and 12 work. And in this county, 1, 2, and 4 work. And, and they have it literally down by the county. They know your rules better than your election workers. So one of the things up in Michigan and a lot of these swing states, they had to manipulate the voter registration.
Ann Maish, she's the city clerk in Muskegon, and she first received between 8,000 and 10,000 voter registration application forms from this individual, one woman, and that's when she alerted the Muskegon police. The Muskegon Police Department then must have alerted the Attorney General's office, Dana Nessel, our lawless Michigan Attorney General. She then asked the Michigan State Police to become involved in the investigation. And that's kind of where the report starts, because this is the Michigan State Police report. And as you can see, it's pretty heavily redacted. So what they did do, though, what's interesting is in a couple different places in the report, they accidentally, I'm not sure, they left out the name of the woman who dropped off the between 8,000 and 10,000 voter registration applications. And in the report, the Muskegon city clerk mentions that this woman brought an additional 2,500 voter applications, and I think it was the following day. And that's when the police started following her. Another interesting point is the police began tracking these individuals that they thought were involved in this ring of voter registration fraud in Michigan. And they were using the same technology, the GPS tracking that True the Vote used, that Democrats and the media mocked as being inaccurate and unreliable. So I think that's important to note, because throughout the report, they talk about the GPS tracking that they used. They started in Muskegon with the report. They were able to identify that an organization was working out of a California eyewear company building that had been vacated. So it was a vacant building, but it was formerly a California eyewear building, and I think it still had the signage out front. So it was very discreet. They started the investigation in Muskegon. The investigation led them to multiple cities across the state of Michigan, including Flint, I think Grand Rapids, Ypsilanti, Southfield. Southfield is where they found the cache of weapons, including semi-automatic weapons and other guns in this facility, where they found bags of prepaid voting cards. They identify at least one burner phone in the report. They talk about all the iPads that were being used by the individuals that were hired. Now, GBI Strategies is unredacted in the report, which is interesting. They're unredacted twice. And the report that we have is, I think, 58 pages long. But throughout the report, they are redacted. So I'm not sure why they were left, for us to see in the report twice. So we were able to find GBI Strategies. And they also mentioned the owner of GBI Strategies in the report, Gary Bell. We were able to determine that I think he's in Tennessee. But what he was doing is he was using outside organizations to hire these workers who were canvassing and bringing in these registrations. I think what's really important to also note is that recently our lawless Attorney General, Dana Nessel, announced 8 felony charges against 16 electors in Michigan who she claims cast fake electoral votes, which is completely inaccurate. They cast an alternate set of electoral votes, and they did it because the investigations were not complete in Michigan, and there was so many ongoing investigations and lawsuits being filed that they weren't comfortable with the outcome.
And you got to ask yourself the question, would you be comfortable with the outcome? You've got the state troopers following around some woman and her network of people that dropped off, did I hear the number 12 1,250 ballot registrations or voter registrations. So in Georgia, they're ordering extra absentee ballots weeks prior to the election without envelopes. In Michigan, you've got voter registration. So they're loading up the universe of ballots that they can submit into the system during the election. All of this happened. Okay. All of this happened. Seemingly different groups and different people all over the country doing that. However, there's one key thing that has to be remembered. All of those ballots, all of those voter registration in, I believe, every jurisdiction in the country runs through machines. But before we get to that, I've got to do a shameless ad. So you've probably noticed Rumble is growing and it's not slowing down. They're building a real alternative big tech that puts creators first and actually protects free speech. I love Rumble. It's been one of the best platforms we've ever worked with. It's a little glitchy from time to time. And now there's Rumble Premium, an easy way to upgrade your experience with Premium. You get ad-free viewing across the platform, no pre-rolls, no interruptions, just the content you came for. Don't like the commercials other than the ones I say? You've got to be a Rumble Premium subscriber. Plus, Premium members unlock exclusive content like bonus videos. I do like 20 minutes a day or more of Premium exclusive content. Cheat code, get it on the audio. Plus, Premium members unlock exclusive content like bonus videos, behind-the-scenes drops, and more from your favorite creators. Right now on Rumble, they're offering $10 off an annual subscription. Just go to rumble.com/premium and use the promo code STUDIO at checkout. That's rumble.com/premium, promo code STUDIO. No ads, more freedom, and the content you actually care about. So you have to tie all this together when it comes to the election stuff. Okay. You've got extra ballots being printed. You have voter registration being expanded. And then you've got the different online systems that centralize this information, which are easily manipulatable. There's this person, Gary Bernstein, I believe is his name. And he is one of these CIA agents. He used to be a station chief, highly respected in the intelligence community. This is his face. You might recognize it. This is back when he did the Rogue podcast with Laura Logan. And he talks about Venezuela and Iran. So we have an operation of some flavor where you've got ballots being printed, ordered through the state of Georgia. You've got voter registration being inflated, state of Michigan doing nothing about it. Those two patterns repeat themselves in Arizona, Philadelphia, Wisconsin. You see it happening all over, let alone in the blue states where it becomes essentially institutionalized. And those things didn't even raise red flags. And then you've got the voting machines. Now, what do we know about the voting machines? Well, let's listen to Gary Bernstein a little bit. All of those ballots, that universe of registrants that could potentially be casting a ballot, all of it centralizes in the machine.
We just know he was the only foreign leader that was brought there because the Iranians provided some engineers too. There were Iranian engineers inside the CNE. So he was brought over to watch it there, watch it steal it from Trump. Watch us punish the Americans.
Watch us punish the Americans. They are all eating popcorn during the...
So Gary Bernstein is saying during the election of 2020, Iranian officials came down to Caracas, to Venezuela, and sat in their CNE center, which was their mainframe cyber hub, where from that cyber hub, they were able to manipulate the voting machines in the United States. And what Gary says is this is a direct quote that is on one of the affidavits from one of these guys that has turned on the Venezuelans because he didn't like what Maduro was doing to his country, is the story we've heard, has signed an affidavit saying that the Iranians were there, and in 2020 they said, let's screw the Americans. That is the sad reality we live in. Now, many people are familiar with Ian Carroll. Ian Carroll it's kind of like me. I don't know. He's like me. He's a kindred spirit, right? He's a pundit. He's out there doing research and he's trying to share it with the people. He's got this great little clip here and he's been all over this Epstein stuff and different things like that. And he's done a lot of deep dives on the CIA. It's really entertaining and interesting to listen to. And he just came out with this clip, and it's from a book that talks about the creation of the CIA. This is totally worth listening to.
Do you know what the CIA's very first mission ever in its history was? On December 14th, 1947, the National Security Council issued its first top-secret orders to the CIA. The CIA set out to beat the Reds in the
Italian elections.
Word TikTok doesn't allow, set for April 1948. And yes, let's just all admire the irony of how in a democracy in America, we can't use that word
Elections.
in our media or else we'll get censored. That's great. But back then, the CIA didn't really have an official budget and they didn't have a bunch of money. They just had a bunch of friends. So James Forrestal and his good friend Alan Dulles solicited their friends and colleagues from Wall Street and Washington, business people, bankers, and politicians. But it was never enough. So the CIA's first mission ever was to overthrow a government and fix a word I can't say.
Election.
And to do it, they used money that came from all of their business people, friends, bankers, etc. But they needed more money too. So he convinced Snyder to tap into the exchange stabilization fund set up in the Depression to shore up the value of the dollar. Because who needs to do that anyways? A fund held $200 million that was earmarked for the reconstruction of Europe. And they funneled it into the bank accounts of a bunch of wealthy American citizens, a lot of them Italian Americans.
So let's pause this just for a second. Okay, so the CIA's first job ever was to overthrow the Italian elections. But of course, Congress wasn't going to allocate funds to do that because they wouldn't want to write that down on paper anywhere, okay? And so what they do, they gathered up the bankers and the money interest. And then what did they do? They stole from the money that had been set aside to rebuild Europe. Oh my goodness, this sounds a lot like, I don't know, what the bankers today are still doing. What's changed?
I can only imagine what other organizations all these Italian Americans might have been a part of.
Mafia.
They even told the donors to place
and Italian Americans also part of the Vatican.
A special code on their income tax forms alongside their charitable donation. So their CIA donations to help control a government over there was tax deductible. Quote, passing black bags to effect a political
election
is not really a terribly attractive thing. No shit, but it worked. Italy's Christian Democrats won by a comfortable margin and formed a government that excluded communists.
Okay. So that was the CIA's first ever job. So we know the CIA's been involved in overthrowing elections. In fact, that's their base operating system. Their first ever task was to do just that. Is that right or wrong? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is that good for America? Is it good for our soul? Like what how do we calculate that? How do we deal with it? But one thing we do know is the United States government has figured out how to rig foreign elections. It's not a huge hop, skip, and a jump to think that our elections could also be rigged. When you've got these pinch points like, election workers that don't seem to want to tell the truth or want to protect their job or are told whatever they're doing is normal, that, it's normal for us to have unfolded ballots that we put through the machines. Okay. This smells of an op. And not only that, who was involved? Venezuela and Iran. And sitting at the top of that is China. So, if you're a listener to this podcast, we've been talking about this since I got back from prison. And here we are. We went and took out Maduro. And we, on this podcast, one of the very few, directly connected it to the fact that you can't let the president of Venezuela stand when he tried to take out our democracy and our republic. Then you've got Iranian involvement. You can't let Iran continue to be a country with its current leadership structure when they were also involved in overthrowing our country. It's very difficult to internalize this. I think most of my audience listeners have internalized this and at least comprehend this. But we had at least a 4-year period under Joe Biden where our country had been overthrown by foreign powers. And what did they do? They printed money. They opened the border. They flooded your neighborhoods with migrants. They took your jobs. Every new job that was created under Joe Biden went to a non-American born. There were no legacy Americans that had net job growth under Joe Biden. That is an attack on America. And not only that, we know that Iran, as reported, sent hit squads out after Donald Trump. Now, Matt Walsh is as he calls himself, Christian fascist or something like that. It's kind of a funny deal. Matt makes a lot of moral judgments, right? He sees the world through this moral lens. And Matt's a smart guy. I mean, he can do political calculations, but I think what happens is you get so tired of doing political calculations, you just land on some side of absolutism, right? And that's where Matt Walsh has landed. He and Tucker Carlson have had discussions about how Iran's not that bad of a country because, you know, they protect the virtue of women by covering them in the burqas. And then in the next sentence, they'll be like, but they're so repressive of women, right? So they make these weird moral judgments and these apologetic statements to try to justify things. If you go back in time, though, there's one thing that Matt Walsh made very clear. If another nation tried to overthrow our country, okay, assassinate our president, attack our presidential candidates, I don't know, I would throw in there manipulate elections, that we would be completely justified in going to war.
If it's actually true that Iran has tried to or is right now trying to kill our president, then absolutely we should invade the country.
Or take over our democracy
And annihilate the whole regime. Obviously, when the United States says it should the United States should personally kill every person in the Iranian government if they're trying to assassinate our president. This is an act of war against us, and we would be totally justified in responding with overwhelming violent force.
So this was, of course, before we actually went into Iran and did something about it, when you could just say it and there was no consequence for saying it. This week, Matt Walsh has been, oh my gosh, we're going to war in Iran. The world's being destroyed. How could this? Matt, why are we going to war with Iran? Not only do we have absolute confirmation they sent hit squads into the United States to take out Donald Trump, but we have in fact shown and proven, if you pay any attention to this part of the debate, that Iran, through Venezuela, were directly tied to overthrowing the United States government in 2020.
Now, you still can't go in and purposely kill civilians, but we would be, that's an act of war, and we should respond with our own act of war. If you try to kill our president, if you as a sovereign nation conspire to kill our president, we should go in and conquer and destroy you and wipe out anyone even vaguely involved in the plot.
Okay. So Matt Walsh, now the reason I played this is Matt Walsh has been very anti, what are we doing in Iran? It's not in America's best interest. Dear Mr. Matt Walsh, it is in America's best interest. By your own standard, a year ago, you said if they try to take out the president, or I'll even throw in there, overthrow our government, which they in fact did, and I'll throw China in there too. If we were to go to open war with China over this, it would be completely justified. Okay, because why? Because power is a zero-sum game. Someone has to win and someone has to lose. In the end, we're all kind of losers, okay? But someone has to take power. And if we don't have power, they will. And when they have power, when the global interests, the communists have power, what do? They suppress the peasant. They suppress the people. They take your jobs. They take your dignity. They take your health. All of those things. They take your economic opportunity. All of it. Okay? Our country is not without fault. I am the biggest hater on our debt-based economic system. Okay? But this is still my country. I still have to live here. I still have to live under the rules and regulations that the people who have the keys to the mayor's mansion set forth. Otherwise, I'm in open rebellion with my neighbor because they've acquiesced. How disturbing is it to think that people pay their taxes, that people follow the rules put forth by false leaders, by leaders who got their position of authority by fraud, deceit, murder, theft, everything? It completely justifies eliminating those bad actors. How do you go about doing that? Well, that's the story we're watching under Donald Trump 2.0, is trying to get our country back. Just because he won the 2024 election does not mean that we're going to, by default, win the 2026 election or by default win the 2020 election, because our policies are better. The policies mean nothing. The policies mean nothing. In fact, I'll go a step further. And I'll even say there's a very strong possibility, as Catherine Austin Fitts has stated a couple different times, that the bankers who are ultimately behind a lot of the world order, okay, the people that Epstein was hobnobbing with, who do not think anything of you, Goyim, right? Do not think anything of you, Mr. Peasant, Mrs. Peasant, okay? That the bankers acquiesced and allowed Donald Trump to win for a couple of reasons. One, the dollar's collapsing. They want to introduce a control grid, and they believe Donald Trump can do it. So Donald Trump has to thread this little needle. He has to work with what is the banking system, the dollar system, the petrodollar. He's got to use the levers he has, which other nations are slowly pulling themselves out of the system where those levers no longer work. This is where Marco Rubio says sanctions in 5 years will not be effective because they're not going to be trading in the dollar. So we can say, yeah, no more money for you, Russian oligarch. And they're like, I got China to trade with. I got Brazil to trade with. I got Iran over there. I got billions of people that are more than happy to trade with me outside of the dollar system, outside of the petrodollar system. That's not good for me. In a perfect world, in a utopia, if I could hit the big red button and reset the world, we wouldn't have the petrodollar system. We'd have something that was in weights and measures that was more sustainable, a credit system, not a debt system, a debit system, okay? But that's not the world we live in. And we're not in a world where we have sovereignty. What do I mean by that? We don't know who runs these nation states. You follow that Dominion trail back to Smartmatic in Venezuela, and they bragged about overthrowing 72 nations. There's only 210 countries in the world, and they overthrew a third of them? You're telling me that Venezuela, with the help of Iran and the help of China, was controlling a third of our nation states? Patrick Burns said one time, those farmers in the Netherlands that show up at their parliament and dump crap all over their front steps every year when they pass another farm bill that eliminates their ability to be farmers? He says, that's not natural. That's not the people in the Netherlands voting for that. That's these globalists, this one world communist order trying to oppress the peasant, the people who can self-sustain. So let's talk about the dollar. This is Catherine Austin Fitts. She makes a couple of interesting points here. She's been saying for years the dollar's going nowhere, the dollar's going nowhere, and now she's advising her clients and the people that work with her that this year the dollar might collapse, and if not this year, it's probably going to be soon.
For 3 decades, I've been saying the dollar's not going to collapse, the dollar's not going to collapse. So now I'm going to say you need to be prepared in case it does, because it could. It could collapse this year. I'm not saying it will. I don't think it will, but
and when we talk about collapse, there's a difference between an orderly decline,
right,
and disorderly and frantic.
Right. So now we're in an orderly decline.
Yes. Right.
Although it's not an orderly world, but it's an orderly decline.
Yes.
So, we've been talking about our scenarios for 2026, and there are two axes on our scenario design. One is de-dollarization, which can be fast or slow.
Mm-hmm.
We're literally not conceiving of a scenario when dollars go up.
Yeah.
The stablecoins is successful. It could. It could. So I think if it's successful, slow down the de-dollarization. It won't stop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But then the other axis is violent disruption, a lot of which is man-made.
Mm-hmm.
And what's very interesting, and I know you experience this with your clients all the time, if de-dollarization is fast, then we will feel that as much higher inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, or I would say it's cost of goods.
Mm-hmm.
So household cost of goods skyrockets, energy, housing, etc.
Did we not just see that under Joe Biden?
Disruption can be highly deflationary.
Mm-hmm.
It can also be inflationary, but it can generally, it's like a deflation machine. I used to say Fauci's job was to manufacture deflation.
Mm-hmm.
Had nothing to do with health. You get a call, and the central bankers need more deflation. Shut Main Street down.
Violent disruption is a much more local thing, where de-dollarization is more of a countrywide federal thing.
Yeah, so de-dollarization hits everybody in the balance sheet, no matter where you are, right? And cost of capital. But violent disruption depends on where it is.
Right.
Right.
A geophysical event might only impact Tim in Philadelphia and not even come near somebody who's on the western side of the country.
Right. So violent disruption we have at 2025 levels, or or great
Ramping up.
intensification.
Right.
Right. And I think there's a relationship because the more you de-dollarize, the faster you go, the more inflation you create, the more Mr. Global has reason to increase violent disruption.
To offset.
Right. Right.
The violence is the new Anthony Fauci.
Okay. So what she's saying there, and this is very true. When the dollar gets in trouble, you've got to find a way to spend it where it dissipates, okay? Because dollars in circulation, as you continue to add more dollars, they pile up. And so you want to cross deflation, you want to spend money in places where the money evaporates. JFK, right, when he developed the rocket program or stole the rocket program from the Germans, he decided instead of building missiles to launch to Russia, he said, let's build missiles and launch them to the moon and try to enlist everybody in a peaceful endeavor to pursue the technology. But the thing that it did, because remember, JFK had a lot going on with the finance. He created the silverback where he was trying to make go back to a sound currency model, right? So all these different things. But what he wanted to do with the space race was to have a place to spend, to devalue from World War II levels of spending, right? Or I guess they had to kind of keep up that level of spending, but he wanted to put it somewhere that wasn't violent. Okay, so he put it into the space race. Fast forward, and we've seen this, right? Anytime that the bankers need deflation, they need a place to offload their books. They do it through war. Anthony Fauci did it through the COVID pandemic, right? And so this is kind of the way bankers are like, hey, rather than everybody get blown away by a currency collapse, let's just cause war and we can deflate our fiat bubble a little bit. Sounds good. Sounds great, right? Except the problem is can't go on forever. The only out that she can see is the stablecoin, which I don't know, could possibly happen. Okay, tying it all together. We're bombing Iran. We've already arrested Nicolas Maduro. Things in Venezuela, by all reports, sounds like they're going pretty good. The Cubans are obviously tied in between Iran and Venezuela. They're a big part of this. Cubans seem to be on their knees right now trying to work a deal. Cuba's on the brink of collapse. They've got almost no flights going in or out because they're literally out of jet fuel. They can't pick up the garbage because they're literally out of gasoline to put in the garbage trucks. They can't provide social services. Their health system is on the brink if it's not already destroyed. So they're in a tough spot. Okay, that's good. All of this conflict, right? Is it to prop up the dollar, or are we getting ready for a crash and we no longer want to have to enforce our dollar as the world's policeman? So how do you do it? You try to clean up the board real quick and then retract. That's what it feels like is happening to me. It doesn't mean, however, that you don't have sympathies for the people in these different nations that we're dealing with. So Donald Trump, when it comes to Russia and the Iraq or the Russia-Ukraine conflict, he's trying to work out a diplomatic solution. Every conflict he's been in, he's tried to work out some diplomatic solution using every lever of power that he has left to him. And it's worked to some pretty good success up until this point. The Iran thing's a little different. Iran is a big country. Iran is a country that's kind of like a Switzerland. It's got mountains on three sides and an ocean on the other, right? It's very easily defendable. You're not rolling tanks into Iran very easily. It's an air attack only kind of situation, which of course, means what can you really do from the air if you can't actually be boots on the ground? So it would be best if they could negotiate with Iran, if they could compel Iran that it's in their best interest to just play nice, stay on your border, stop fomenting terror, stop supporting the Venezuelans and other bad actors that are overthrowing nations around the world. That'd be great. Steve Whitkoff was paired up with Jared Kushner, and he was on Sean Hannity last night explaining how the negotiations with Iran went. And I want you to recall, this is a zero-sum game here. Someone has to come out on top and someone has to come out on the bottom, okay? Iran, nobody ever wants to interfere with their sovereignty, but you can't interfere with ours. If you interfere with our sovereignty, that's cause for total annihilation and war. Because I have to defend what's right. I have the right to defend what's mine. I have the right to do that. I have the right to self-defense. If you're going to destroy my way of life, then you put me in a position where I have to destroy your way of life. It's a zero-sum game. This isn't about utopia. This isn't about what should be. This is about what is. And what is might makes right. What is what Chairman Mao discovered. All political power, which is just, politics as usual, all political power comes from the barrel of a gun. A law is not a law unless it's enforceable. Okay, so Steve Whitkoff and Jared Kushner go to meet with the Iranians, and this is how their negotiations went.
So just to give you a little bit of a taste for how these three days of negotiations went, 3 separate times, Jared and I opened up with...
And by the way, this is after Obama negotiated. This is after Carter negotiated, Reagan negotiated, Clinton negotiated, Bush 2 negotiated. I think Bush 1 negotiated. Every American president has been dealing with Iran. They have been a bad actor since they took the Marines and, you know, hid them away or took them from the barracks and took the prisoners hostage in 1979. They've been bad actors all along. So every president has had this thorn in their side of Iran. It's not just these 3 negotiations. These were the 3 final negotiations.
The Iranian negotiators telling us they had the inalienable right to enrich all their nuclear fuel that they possessed. They opened up. We, of course, responded that the president feels we have the inalienable right to stop you dead in your tracks. They then went on to say that beyond the inalienable right to enrich, that was going to be their starting point. And Jared and I just sort of looked at ourselves flummoxed and said, well, we're really in for it now.
So the Iranians didn't quite read the room right, but at the same time, I can agree with the sentiment. They have a right to enrich uranium and defend themselves. But if we believe that you're going to use that enriched uranium, strap it onto a missile and launch it to one of my friends, one of our allies, then we have a right to stop you because we have a right to self-defense. We don't believe that you're just going to use those nuclear missiles for self-defense. We believe you're going to use it to advance your apocalyptic vision of the world. Steve Whitkoff went on to continue to explain about the negotiations, and this is when it kind of really fell apart.
Well, it was pretty silly, but they thought they could strong-arm us. You know, President Trump sent me and Jared there to really determine on his behalf whether they were serious about doing a deal that addressed his objectives, which are elimination of their missile program, elimination of their advocacy and support for proxies, which is destabilizing the entire Middle East, elimination of their Navy so we can have freedom of the seas and not be threatened with the shutdown of the Gulf of Hormuz, and finally, no nuclear enrichment that can get them to weapons grade, which means no nuclear bomb. And we went in there and tried to make a fair deal with them, and it was very, very clear that it was going to be impossible, probably by the end of the second meeting. But we then went back for the third meeting just to give it the last college try. And of course, they thought they wanted us to report positivity. It was not positive, that meeting.
So the Oman negotiator, and here's a picture of him here, right here, the Oman negotiator. So he got on the Sunday shows before the bombing started and was like, "Oh, Iran has said that they agree they can't have a nuke, and that's fine." And he said, "We have a core agreement." They never had a core agreement. Iran never for 1 minute didn't think that they weren't going to eventually get nuclear weapons. And even if you gave them the most benign interpretation of that desire for detente, right, in order to prevent what's happening right now in Iran from happening, even if you concede them that, their track record has proven that they don't keep their sovereignty and their borders. They expand terror all throughout the region and all the way into the United States. And not only that, using the Matt Walsh standard, if you try to take out our president, we are justified to escalate to the top and take you out. If you overthrow our elections and overthrow our country, then we absolutely have a right to do to you. It's just obvious. But this is what they're not talking about on the news. This is why you've got to tune into Peasants' Perspective or other podcasts like this, independent media. They're not making the connection here. Oh, Iran's always fomented terror. And when you say Iran's always fomented terror, then it's like, well, we also do some nefarious things. Well, Iran overthrew an election. Well, we overthrew an election. You know what? It doesn't matter. It's in my best interest, Taylor, that the United States of America be safe and secure. However they accomplish that, at a certain point, I have to kind of get on board with it. Okay? I believe that the United States wants to have a peaceful planet because Americans are generally peaceful. And I think most peasants are generally peaceful. It's these nation states and their different interests when they don't get along. Two wrongs don't make a right. Just because we overthrow Iran doesn't mean they have the right to overthrow us. But it does mean that they're probably going to try, and they did. Which now means we have to recapture our sovereignty, because that's a hill worth dying on. Unfortunately, they won't explain this to you, because if they explain to you that our country was overthrown by Venezuela, by Iran, as proxies to most likely China, clearly China, okay, they're the board of trustees or whatever on the global anti-American empire, or whatever you want to call it, the anti-America forces. When you consider that and you internalize it, that the last 4 years under Joe Biden, we were a captured nation. We were not a republic of the people, by the people, for the people. Oh, we were a democracy, but it was a democracy of stakeholders. It was a democracy of foreign interests and malign corporate interests. Stakeholders, right? Democracy, stakeholders. They overthrew our government. This is very difficult to internalize. You paid your taxes for 4 years. You followed all the rules. Joe Biden passed a whole lot of legislation that got put into effect. Joe Biden let criminals out of prison. I know some of them. I got let out of prison by Trump, right? But I know some of the people Biden let out. These aren't good people. Some of them, most of them, okay? He did that. So how do you go back? The milk has been spilled. How do you put it back in the carton? You know what governments are going to do? Don't admit it. They want to keep their authority. They want to keep the acquiescence and the consent of the governed. So they can never let you know that they were overthrown. They can never let you know that a good chunk of our senators, this is what Tuberville was saying, only a dozen or so of these senators up here were actually elected. The rest of them have their seats illegally by fraud, okay, with the help of Iranians. So you wonder why the talking points and, oh, this is all about terrorism. If you say it's all about terrorism, it justifies coming for us because we've committed acts of terrorism. Remember, it's always in the eye of the beholder. One man's terrorist is another man's patriot. I know this for a fact. In one single day, I've been virulently called a terrorist, seditionist, traitor to the country, while at the same time, I've been given hugs and high fives saying I'm a patriot. At a certain point, I don't care if you call me a patriot or a terrorist, your opinion of me stops mattering. Okay? I just want peace and contentment. So the stuff we're being told by our politicians, we have to see through that lens. We don't know if they're telling us bits of the truth, the whole truth, or nothing. The story that Marco Rubio told yesterday, he came down and did a big old press briefing on Capitol Hill, and he said something that was not good to say. Okay, this was not good to say, and it set off alarm bells all over the place. This is the fog of war. This is the conflict. I would submit to you, you have to keep the objective in mind. They overthrew our country. That cannot stand. It can't stand. The Matt Walsh standard. Everybody who even remotely conspired to do that must go. Okay, that's our starting point. So now it's just the fallout. How do we deal with the fallout? How do we justify it? Because this is going to turn into a bigger conflict. And one of the things Marco Rubio said is maybe the United States isn't really the one who was behind this Operation Epic Fury, right? It was actually the Israelis who basically told us, we're going into Iran with or without you. And under that calculation, it kind of changed the way the United States had to approach this, because suddenly you have an action that's going to be taken by a foreign country, and the retaliation is almost certainly going to come on our doorstep.
The States conducted this operation with a very clear goal in mind. I haven't got a chance to see a lot of reporting. I don't understand what the confusion is. Let me explain it to you, and I'll do it once again as clearly as possible. Perhaps you'll report it that way. The United States is conducting an operation to eliminate the threat of Iran's short-range ballistic missiles and the threat posed by their Navy, particularly to naval assets.
So what they're proposing to us is that the Iranian strategy was, look, we don't have nuclear bombs yet, but we have enough nuclear material to make 11 warheads. That was what Steve Whitkoff told us. So what Iran had figured out was if they could beef up their air defense, their ballistic missiles, and have enough of them, that would create their fortress, right, which would allow them to eventually enrich the uranium, put it on a warhead, and then they've got deterrent forever. Okay, there's a reason why we don't invade North Korea. We know they have bombs. They test them in the mountainside. Okay, so it's like, well, North Korea is North Korea. You can only isolate them so much, but they stay isolated. That's the one nice thing about North Korea. So he's saying that they were going to build up their ballistic missiles. And if we just let them do the conventional armament, build up their Navy, build up their missiles, eventually they'll be such a strong foe that we won't be able to take any kind of military action without, World War II, World War III type military defense production, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, you got to strike now while they're weak so that they can't build up that armament. Okay, that seems like a legit argument.
That is what it is focused on doing right now, and it's doing quite successfully. I'll leave it to the Pentagon and the Department of War to discuss the tactics behind that and the progress that's being made. That is the clear objective of this mission. The second question that's been asked is, why now? Well, there's two reasons why now. The first is it was abundantly clear that if Iran came under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond against the United States. The orders had been delegated down to the field commanders.
Okay, so what he's saying there is if Iran was attacked by anyone, if an explosion went off, they had targets already set to go. So any attack on Iran, they were going to launch missiles. And we saw it happen. They got attacked, and within hours, 7 different nation states around Iran were all hit with missiles. Okay, and we're talking airports, hotels, embassies. The United States Embassy in Doha got hit. I can't remember. One of our embassies got partially hit by a missile. Okay, so they had this, if any attack happened, they were ready to go. We saw that play out.
It was automatic, and in fact, it bared to be true because, in fact, within an hour of the initial attack on the leadership compound, the missile forces in the south and in the north, for that matter, had already been activated to launch. In fact, those had already been pre-positioned. The third is the assessment that was made that if we stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. And so the president made the very wise decision.
Which, by the way, is the calculation they made in Pearl Harbor. When we shut off the Japanese, we knew an attack would come, but we couldn't strike first. We worked economically to strike them, right? But then we waited for them to strike us, and it cost 3,000 lives or more. I can't remember what the total death toll was on Pearl Harbor. And then America was like, okay, now we're justified in going to war. We were justified in going to war in 2020. If we would have known, right? So what Rubio is saying is rather than make the mistake of World War II and allow an event to happen, we wanted to
We knew that there was.
This is a slippery slope, though. There's a slippery slope.
Was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that would precipitate an attack against American forces, and we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
Did you hear that? Israel told Marco Rubio and the Americans they were going to attack. They were going to do that. Israel was going to act on its own, as they quote unquote have a right to do. And that attack would trigger a counterattack on us, which of course at that point, now we're going to get involved. If a battleship gets hit, we're in it. Okay. Tucker Carlson exposes something that when you see this all the time. People don't realize, but the impetus and the reason why Germany invaded Poland, there was a radio station in German territory that had German radio officers working at it. And the Germans took some Polish prisoners to that radio center. They killed the guards. Then they killed the prisoners, the Polish prisoners, put the guards' uniform from the radio tower on the prisoners, laid them out around the tower, waited for the sunlight to come up, took some pictures, wrote some news reports, put it on the radio that Poles had invaded German sovereign territory and killed Germans, and that's what justified Germany invading Poland. The Gulf of Tonkin incident for the United States, the impetus for getting involved in Vietnam. We already had advisors in Vietnam helping them with their so-called civil war or whatever. But then there was this little incident in the Gulf of Tonkin where our ship was attacked. Except it wasn't. There was no attack in the Gulf of Tonkin. There were only radio or news reports of it. And at the time, there was no independent media to verify or not. You just had to trust what the government said. And they said we were attacked, so we went to war. And we lost 60,000 plus young men in Vietnam, plus the millions of Vietnamese that died in that conflict. And whether you think the conflict was right or wrong, that's for history to judge. Ultimately, we did not prevent Vietnam from becoming a communist country. Okay? So I don't know if that blood spilt was worth it or not. But it definitely wasn't a conflict that started because Vietnam attacked us. So here we are attacking Iran. They did attack us. That is a difference here. Vietnam didn't overthrow our elections in 1954 or whatever, okay? So they did attack us. That justifies an attack on Iran. However, what we're being told in the media is going to rip our nation apart. Because the story and the reason why we're attacking Iran, and the reason why we arrested Nicolas Maduro, and the reason why we're isolating China economically and trying to force them to a Chinese regime change, okay, is not being told. The truth is not being told. We're being told lies to justify what would otherwise be a righteous cause. And we're getting in bed with people who are absolutely okay creating these false flag events. The reason it'll rip our nation apart is because if we don't know the truth, we live in this world where the two wrongs don't make a right. How can we be terrorists, but then we fight terrorists? And how? That's not what's going on here, okay? Tucker Carlson got inside information, and this is a fact. Oh, I need to share screen with you guys. It's so hard when Ron's not here. There's not as much laughter. Before we play this, I'm going to read the chats because I've been missing them. Monty Easel, no sound on the president. Already read that. Marazin, happy morning. Ron Cleaver Jr. Oh, I miss him today. Shocker. 1776 live PMA. So many people are complacent. It's true, they are. And then Ron says, two wrongs don't make a right. It is true. Two wrongs don't make a right. Unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong when power is on the line. Okay, so this is Tucker Carlson.
It wasn't a risk from the Israeli standpoint. That was the point. That was the point. They wanted to diminish the Gulf, and in 2 days they have. And I think anyone who likes decency and order and cleanliness is hoping that the Gulf will recover. The Gulf is not a threat to us. We have military bases in these countries. These are some of our closest allies. All of them are closer allies than Israel, by far. They're our friends. But they've been really hurt. And in a place like Dubai, which is basically part of a country, it's an emirate within the United Arab Emirates, but it's also a luxury brand, basically. People go to Dubai because it's beautiful and rich and clean, and above all, because it's safe and orderly. It's got the busiest airport in the world. You start seeing video on Instagram of smoke in the Dubai airport, and you're like, I think I'm going to Cabo this year. Oh, sorry, drug cartels. Whatever. Maybe you go to Sedona this year. It really, really hurts these countries. And Israel wanted to hurt these countries. That's the point. Wanted to hurt these countries. Wanted to sow chaos and disorder because they are rivals of Israel. So it's probably hasn't been reported, but it's a fact that last night in Qatar and Saudi Arabia, authorities arrested Mossad agents planning on committing bombings in those countries. Now, that's weird. That doesn't make any sense. Why would the Israelis be committing bombings in two Gulf countries, which are also being attacked by Iran? Aren't they on the same side? No. Israel wants to hurt Iran and Qatar and UAE and Saudi and Bahrain and Oman and Kuwait. And they've succeeded.
And they've succeeded. Tucker Carlson's great. He's great. Unfortunately, my assessment with Tucker Carlson is the same as my assessment with Matt Walsh. There's one thing you're forgetting. There's the election part. Almost everything else can be forgiven, right? Victim, oppressor, terrorist, patriot. Let's just stop fighting. We can just walk away. You can walk away from a fist fight. You can walk away from a fist fight. But for Americans, this is a little more than that. And unfortunately, it's pushing us into the arms of Israel. And look what Israel was doing. They were trying to basically create false flags. If Iran didn't launch missiles into those different nations, Israel was going to go ahead and do a suicide bomber, right? And then blame it on Iran and enlist their help to fight their war. And of course, they would be depleted in fighting of that. That's Israel's MO. Okay, here's Netanyahu. He was on Sean Hannity last night, and Donald Trump told Americans, watch Netanyahu on Sean Hannity. Okay, Netanyahu's... I don't know what to think about Netanyahu. But here's Netanyahu being asked just about that. Did you guys plan on attacking Iran and draw the Americans into this? Again, these talking points, which even if they're true, Iran was going to attack regardless, which I clearly see evidence of. And so we're like, well, we better attack first. Makes sense to me. But most Americans aren't going to get on board with that. Most Americans aren't going to like the way that looks. Most Americans don't want war for war's sake. If you explain to them about the elections and about our sacred republic and how it was taken from us and we were left with a democracy of stakeholders, maybe they would understand a little bit differently. But if these are the talking points that they're selling the Iran war, this is going to rip us apart because the internet figures out the truth. Okay. People like me are going to figure it out because our lives have been impacted and we wanted to know why. I went to prison over this nonsense. This war in Iran, arresting Nicolas Maduro, all of the stuff that's going on, this all ties into my life. Okay. So here's Netanyahu.
And I want to ask you this, there are people that say, well, the prime minister of Israel dragged Donald Trump into it. And as somebody that's been friends with him over 30 years, nobody drags Donald Trump into anything, number one, but I want to get your reaction to that.
Well, you're right. I mean, that's ridiculous. Donald Trump is the strongest leader in the world. He does what he thinks is right for America. He does also what he thinks is right for future generations. And frankly, we're partners in that effort because I've devoted my life to securing the life of the one and only Jewish state. And believe me, it's been a struggle.
Okay, well, that's his right to do that. And he's saying, well, no one drags Donald Trump in. I believe him. So here's one of those spots where it's like, you're lying, but you're telling the truth. Why is he telling the truth? Because Donald Trump was going to do this anyways, with or without Netanyahu. Because Donald Trump was not going to leave his first 4 years in office with Nicolas Maduro still running elections with the help of Iran. It wasn't going to happen. He's not going to leave office with Cuba 90 miles south of Florida fomenting, intelligence operations in our government. He's not going to let it happen. So I believe Netanyahu here. He's right. Donald Trump was going to do this with or without me. But unfortunately, Marco Rubio said, well, we attacked because Israel said they were going to attack and there would be retaliatory strikes. That's probably true, but not the full story. But if that's what they're going to lean on, tell the truth. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Netanyahu goes on to get asked in this interview with Sean Hannity. He goes, just a second, I got too many things to move around to get this done quickly. Okay, so he goes on to say to Sean Hannity here, let's just let it play.
The reason that we had to act now is because they were, after we hit their nuclear sites, their ballistic missiles program, you'd think they learned a lesson, but they didn't because they're unreformable. They're totally fanatic about this, about the goal of destroying America. So they started building new sites, new places, underground bunkers that would make their ballistic missile program and their atomic bomb program immune within months. If no action was taken now, no action could be taken in the future. And then they could target America, they could kill America, they could threaten us and threaten everyone in between. So action had to be taken. And you needed a resolute president like Donald J. Trump.
You needed a resolute president like Donald J. Trump. Why? Okay. You needed him because he was going to do it anyways. So that's the other part of this. It was going to happen anyways. Okay. Whether Iran was going to cut a deal, Trump was going to isolate them. He was going to make sure they couldn't do that stuff again. And so now we're here and now it's about interests. Okay. So now the shots have been fired. Iran has been destabilized. America and Israel and the 7 nation states that Iran attacked have all teamed up, right or wrong, whether they're doing it for the right reasons. It doesn't even matter now. They're doing it. and power is a zero-sum game. So now it's about what happens with Iran. The last time we did something like this, Iraq, Afghanistan, we spent 20 years. We tried to rebuild their countries. We tried to instill democracy. Total failure. Total failure. So it's one thing to decapitate the Ayatollah, decapitate his leadership that were fomenting terror, overthrowing elections, et cetera, et cetera. It's another thing to come in and then take over a country. So this is where now things change. This is where now we get to decide whether this was a justified attack to eliminate the people that tried to destroy us and then let the people of Iran continue to be sovereign and determine their own destiny, or do the bankers and the opportunists step in and basically do what we did with the Shah and then do what we did with the Ayatollah? Okay, those two activities are what led to large portions of Iran being able to shout death to America because they felt like they had been oppressed. Okay, well, two wrongs don't make a right. I don't care what the CIA did. I'm not guilty of their sins, me personally. Okay, I'll fight them and I'll fight you at the same time. How about we do that? That's the American way. So here is Marco Rubio explaining what the plan is for Iran. This is a change of pace. This is where Donald Trump understands what has to get done and what doesn't have to get done. What has to get done is Maduro had to go. What has to get done is the Ayatollah has to go. What doesn't have to get done is a generation of nation building.
We would love to see this regime be replaced. And ultimately, as the president has said, he calls... No, but let me finish my answer. As the president said, he would love for the people of Iran to use this as an opportunity to rise up and remove these leaders. They've been wanting to remove them from a long time. We've seen successive waves of protests, and we've seen them slaughter people. Okay? But the objective of this mission is to make sure they don't have these weapons that can threaten us and our allies in the region. That's why we're doing what we're doing now. And while we would love to see a new regime, the bottom line is no matter who governs that country a year from now, they're not going to have these ballistic missiles and they're not going to have these drones to threaten us. That's the objective of this mission, is to deny them the ability to use ballistic missiles to threaten their neighbors, to threaten our bases, to threaten our presence in the region, and ultimately as a shield behind which they can do whatever they want with their nuclear weapons ambition. We were not going to let them hide behind that. And that's why this was such a critical mission to undertake now while they were at their weakest point, and not a year from now where they could inflict even more damage and perhaps already be behind that point of immunity.
That makes sense to me. That makes sense to me as long as it wasn't all contingent on Israel was going to attack first. Okay? It makes sense to me. I don't know if you're going to sell it to the American people. But remember, we're working up the ladder here to get to the real head of the snake. We went from Venezuela, we went to Cuba because we cut them off. They're a little bit easier to deal with, I believe, because I mean, as far as the military is concerned, it'd be like we'd take over Cuba in like 9 minutes if we really wanted to. Okay, I don't believe they have ballistic missiles. I don't believe that. But now we went to Iran. But the real objective is red communist China, not the Chinese people, the CCP. Okay, so how does this affect the CCP? Laura Ingraham had on Gordon Chang. And Elon Musk has emphasized that China is becoming solar independent. Well, they might be heading towards solar independence, but they're definitely not solar independent now. So how does this attack on Iran affect China?
Here to weigh in is Gordon Chang, Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow. Now, Gordon, China only got, it's hard to gauge it, but between maybe 13 and 18% of all of its oil from Iran. But nevertheless, this was a cheap source of energy, was it not? That can't help.
Yeah, certainly discounted. And by the way, China gets about 45% of its imported oil through the Strait of Hormuz, because it's not just Iran, it's Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf states. Nothing is passing the Strait of Hormuz at this moment. Shippers don't want to take the risk. And the IRGC has announced a few hours ago that it is closing the strait. Nothing will get through those waters.
Well, Elon Musk made a point that was pretty interesting, I thought, on X. He said that China is rapidly moving to solar electric, a future with solar and electric, with very little need for oil or gas, kind of answering the point that in the end, this won't really affect China at all, but wishful thinking. Your reaction to that?
Yeah, Elon Musk, I love him, but he's wrong on this because China right now depends on oil and gas, and it depends on coal. And yes, it has a lot of solar, but most of the solar industry is exported because they don't believe in green technology. They want us to believe in it. So while a lot of people think, well, China is past the fossil fuel stage, no, it certainly has not.
Okay, so China is now being directly affected by all of this. It's not just their partner, it's their source of energy, and energy is money. Okay, it's why the petrodollar, it's energy. You need energy. They can't run those factories with the cheap labor to produce cheap goods if they don't have cheap energy. So we've pushed China into a corner, just like we pushed Japan into a corner in 1941. So here is Professor Pape, and he is talking about the escalatory ladder when it comes to regime change bombing raids and how this kind of all operates. This is incredibly important to understand because this is the path we're going on. Like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So now we find out what happens when we get punched in the face. And remember, as we go up this escalatory ladder, other actors start to get involved.
Well, I have studied every air campaign since World War I. This is my specialty. I spent 3 years teaching conventional targeting strategy for the U.S. Air Force. I've studied leadership decapitation in detail. I've modeled the bombing of Fordow, the regime change in Iran for 20 years. So this is something I know quite a bit about. And literally 10 days ago, I started on Substack, The Escalation Trap, because I worried exactly watching the Armada being built, we would fall into the escalation trap, and that's what's happened. We are now in the grip of the escalation trap, or the smart bomb trap, to be more precise, where the illusion of the 100% tactical success, which is real, it's the success of the bombs blowing up the targets is not false. It creates the illusion of control of escalation. And that is the smart bomb trap. And that is what has gripped us right now. And the problem is that once we drop those bombs and once we announce regime change is our goal, and we had no other tools, trying to do this from the air, this has never worked in over 100 years. This is not like it works sometimes or rarely works. I'm choosing my words carefully. President Trump is up against the weight of history here. And it's the illusion of the smart bombs being near perfect in destroying their target. And the problem is when those bombs fall, they change politics in the target. They inject nationalism into the regime. They inject nationalism into the society. And they essentially fuse the regime and society against the air power attacker. And this is what you are seeing, because now society and the regime are taking more risky steps. And they do things that no one anticipated before. And that failure to anticipate the worst case, that has happened numerous times with smart bombs. That's just what happened in the last 36 hours.
So it's easy to look at Iran and be like, well, the people don't like the regime. They're constantly in the streets rebelling. Yeah, they are constantly in the streets rebelling. But some percentage of Iran love the Ayatollah and were indoctrinated and part of the same Islamic cult that he's a part of and really believe it. Those people are going to be, your next generation terrorists because why? They want to avenge the death of their supreme leader. The calculation on this gets weird. The calculation of what he talks about with regime change always comes with coming in after the fact and trying to install a regime. And then you got to enforce the regime, which means now you're the boogeyman. You're the police force. If we can keep the strikes limited to government, military, and we leave Iran alone and let them do their own thing, maybe we can curb that. I don't know that that's ever been tried. Okay, but now you're into a logistical challenge because, again, you've got this escalatory ladder. And it's not just Iran. You've got China getting cut off on oil. What if China decides to get involved, right? What if they decide right now to make a move on Taiwan? We cut off their oil. Great. We'll cut off your microchips, your processors, your computers. Now we're in the pickle, okay? So then also, how long do we have to sustain this fight? So Steve Bannon had on, I don't know this guy's name. Steve Bannon had someone on, and he's talking about kind of everything for China's position on oil, but also our armament. How long can we keep up these strikes?
You kind of dropped a bombshell. The president's saying 4 or 5 weeks. And the question people are going to ask, well, hang on, we have a $1 trillion defense budget. we got the greatest weapons manufacturing capability in the world, second to none. Is this because we've been sending weapons to Ukraine? Is it the 12-day war for Israel?
Yep.
And because so far the Chinese Communist Party, and let me be brutally frank, the Chinese Communist Party in Venezuela and now in Iran, with two of their biggest allies, kind of look cucked. I mean, I believe right now you're not even going to see a state visit in April. I don't know how she saves face with his military and his people by having President Trump, but the conquering hero that's taken out Maduro and now taking out the Ayatollah, which are those two combined, I believe, sir, are 80 or 90% of the Chinese Communist Party energy output deal. So what are you talking about that we're running out of weapons?
Well, I just want to correct you. 15% of China's oil comes from Iran and less than 4% came from Venezuela. 80% of Iran's oil is sold to China. But the Chinese have been shifting significantly away from Iran's oil over the last several weeks. In fact, 2 weeks ago, the Chinese bought more oil from Saudi Arabia in the last 3 weeks than they have in the last year because they were anticipating the strikes. I actually, unfortunately, say that I don't believe China is sitting cucked at all. I think they are watching us deplete ourselves in real time, and that's going to give them a lot of strategic leverage. And actually, I'm very concerned. So you're right to mention the $1 trillion budget.
You mean strategic leverage in the South China Sea, the Straits of Taiwan, and with Taiwan?
Yes. Absolutely. And I actually think the Chinese and the Russians are both counting down the days until the CENTCOM AOR's arsenal is depleted and we are forced to pull from Indo-PACOM. Now, look, Taiwan was expecting 2 years ago massive amounts of air defense systems and coastal defense batteries that Biden had to pull out of Taiwan and send to Ukraine, promising, hey, you'll get them in 2027. If this thing, now Trump expedited that. It's supposed to be coming online to them sooner. But if this thing goes on beyond this next weekend, the Americans are going to have to pull those systems set for Taiwan again, only this time for Iran. So if Trump can't get an off ramp, and I think, you guys were talking about the 4-week strategy. I think the real reason he's got these off ramps built in is because our logistics guys are sitting there going, we got to stretch a very finite amount of resources. But just very basically, this thing could be depleted by Monday of next week if we don't get an off ramp.
Okay. So the concern there is that we're depleting our armament, and China is just they've already started buying oil from Saudi Arabia. So other than paying a couple more bucks for it, right? They're kind of playing the game here. They're figuring out how to survive. And I agree. Iran's like, hey, all of our missile defense systems didn't work. Not Iran, but China and Russia both are probably sitting back going, this is not playing out how we expected. So in response to the critiques that, hey, we're running out of missiles, Donald Trump put out a Truth Social, and this is what he said. He said, here's a second here. He said this. He said, the United States munitions stockpiles have, at the medium and upper medium grade, never been higher or better. Okay. As was stated to me today, we have a virtually unlimited supply of these weapons. Wars can be fought forever and very successfully using just these supplies, which are better than other countries' finest arms. At the highest end, we have a good supply, but are not where we want to be. I don't know what high end means, but much additional high-grade weaponry is stored for us in outlying countries. Okay. Sleepy Joe Biden spent all of his time and our country's money giving everything to P.T. Barnum Zelensky of Ukraine, hundreds of billions of dollars worth. And while he gave so much of the superior high-end away free, he didn't bother to replace it. Fortunately, I rebuilt the military in my first term and continue to do so. The United States is stocked and ready to win big. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Donald J. Trump. Is that bluster or is that real? I don't know. I guess we're going to find out. But here's the thing. There's a little promo video, a little hype video that circulated, and I actually really liked it. Because Donald Trump alludes to a couple things here. One, you got to win, right? Two, we have weapons and capabilities that we've never used. The Americans have acted restrained.
Letting somebody else take over where we have to do it again. We can do it again, too. Nobody can stop us. There's nobody that has the capability that we have. You know, when I watch that war in Russia going on and on and on and everybody dying, it's like, it's primitive. It's primitive. It's horrible. They've been put on notice. If you fuck around with us, if you do something bad to us, we are going to do things to you that have never been done before.
We are going to do things to you that have never been done before. Now, in Venezuela, we saw the discombobulator make an appearance, whatever that is, and we've also seen signals jamming going on. So this right here is a video from a Chinese naval vessel. So this is a vessel in the Strait of Hormuz, reportedly lost its signal entirely. The operating ship experienced a total GPS signal blackout. In the video, a Chinese crew member complains that the clock was running unusually fast and that the GPS signal had become chaotic. So let's take a look at this. This is an actual video. It's been verified and confirmed. Okay. So think about this for a second. We're hitting them with missiles, conventional war, but there's something else happening here. There's something else that's happening that other nations are observing. Okay. Their defense systems seem to be useless against this modern U.S. attack. The clock is just running. Okay. It's just an analog clock. Over here, he looks at the GPS. It's all messed up. The GPS has stopped navigating. Our speed has already jumped to 33 knots. These guys are like a speedboat going through the ocean. Okay, not happening. They're not going that fast. So imagine if you're China and you're getting feedback from different vessels in the area going, our GPS is not working. Our signals are jammed. Our analog clocks are speeding up, right? How do we coordinate an attack when we don't know what time it is? Cernovich had an interesting take on this, and I actually agree with it. I think there's something here we're not quite seeing, which changes the calculations. Okay, it changes the escalatory ladder, and this is what the pundits can't figure out. Not only do the pundits not connect the dots that this is a must-win situation, you don't have a republic if you don't take out the actors that overthrew, as a matter of fact, in my opinion, our country. Okay. They're not telling us that because then they'd have to admit that our country was overthrown. And there's probably people voting on laws today or not passing laws, even worse, Save America Act, because they're beholden to stakeholders, to foreign interests, malign interests for whatever purpose, whether ideological, blackmail, it doesn't matter. Cernovich makes this analysis.
By now, everyone has either said that this is World War III and Trump is over, it's so terrible, or that Trump needs to do more. And what if there's a third way? What if there's a third way between Israel first foreign policy and panicking Israel derangement syndrome, where you hate Israel so much that you say, well, the Iranian strike can't possibly be good because Israel will be the beneficiary? What if there's a third way?
This is where Matt Walsh and Tucker Carlson land. Helping Israel, bad, default position, and that becomes the lens that which you see everything. That's not reality. It's not reality. It's just the same. People who are default Islam bad, it's not always reality. Okay? It's not always reality.
What if our tech and weapons are so much more advanced, as the Maduro raid showed, that we don't know what we're talking about? I mean, seriously, have you thought about that for a minute? Why China left Iran stranded after the first strike, the so-called 12-day war, and then Maduro was taken and nothing has happened. So maybe the tech is just so good that if we, the United States, want to go bomb someone or expel a dictator, we can. That's kind of what I'm thinking might be the case. I don't know yet, but maybe it is. Another thing that I'm not really cool with, not really cool rocking with is, do you guys not know the mullahs did murder 30,000 people? People go, source, Cernovich, source. If you're asking me for a source when I bring up a military matter or something like this, then you're just objectively an idiot. And if you're calling me an Israeli firster, you're objectively an idiot and not allowed to even be part of the conversation because you obviously don't know anything. The evil people got killed. We don't know what's going to happen. We'll see, but certainly I'm not panicking, and I'm actually glad that this lowlife and his advisors were killed. How could you not be happy? Evil people died. Let's hope that it doesn't cause chaos, strife, pandemonium, obviously, but take the W when you can.
Yeah, take the W when you can. And what if Just like right after World War II, there was a window of time where the United States had the nuclear bomb and no one else did. And what did Truman do? He went all over the world, Eisenhower and Truman, and you will comply. You will get on the petrodollar. You will get on the world financial system. You will play by the international rules-based order, so to speak. And the United States, because we've been in charge and have had superiority for all these years, have for the most part managed it. And we've done a lot of power sharing and stuff like that. But right now, right, power's a zero-sum game. Okay, you got to take it. If you can't take it, you'll lose it. All right, and when you lose it, you can't control, because we're the only free country in the world. We're the only country with the First Amendment. We're the only country with the Second Amendment. We lose America, and we lose freedom itself. Our umbrella is the only umbrella that preserves the right of individualism. Every other country feigns at it. They feign at it, okay? They only performatively do it because the United States will impose consequences if they don't. It's incredibly important to understand. So here we are. Hopefully we're at a spot where we have better tech. Hopefully we have a spot where no other major nation will dare mess with us because they're afraid of the discombobulator. I hope. Okay. Now, this all does tie in to the global cabal, the Epstein group, right? The group of elite bankers and ideological wizards, right, that sit atop all of these nation states and end up coordinating with all these different leaders. They were overthrowing governments through blackmail and through influence. China was overthrowing it literally through the election systems, through their proxies. Okay. But all of it ties together. There's a cute little video here just for a comedic break, but it explains the Prince Andrew saga. And I think it's pretty relevant because yesterday, Bill and Hillary Clinton, their depositions were released. So we're going to play just a few clips from those. So let's listen to the Prince Andrew saga here.
One day, Prince Andrew was sat feeling rather pleased with himself. He was, after all, money's favourite. He'd owned naval medals, his fancy titles, a lovely posh house, and had no need to sweat about anything, because he was the smartest, most cleverest person in the whole wide world. But being so wonderful and clever meant that everyone wanted to be his friend, including a proper minted but naughty man called Geoffrey. "Here, have a free holiday," said Mr. Geoffrey. But this put Andrew in a pickle, because he had heard that Mr. Geoffrey was accused of some very naughty things. But how could such a naughty person give such good massages, he thought. And with that, Andrew got stuck in, sharing money, secrets, and many super special sleepovers with Mr. Geoffrey. And what was there to worry about? After all, he was far too clever to ever get into trouble. That is, until Mr. Geoffrey was grounded for being a very naughty man, which also got Andrew into trouble, and he lost his fancy job as a UK trade envoy. But not long after, everything blew over, just as Andrew knew it would. Then, years later, a courageous young woman spilled the beans about how he and Geoffrey had forced her to take part in one of their sweaty sleepovers. Oh dear, this time Buckingham Palace went berserk and told Andy that he needed to clear his name. But Andrew knew there was nothing to worry about, as he had this absolutely nailed. He simply went on the telly, explaining that he never knew the girl, he couldn't even sweat, and the Pizza Express in Woking was rather menacing indeed. Oh dear again. It was pretty obvious to everyone watching, but Andy was telling absolute porkies. And this time, he lost not only his fancy titles, but also his fancy medals. And then, not long after, the police found photographs and emails proving that Andy had in fact known the woman, that he could sweat, and the Pizza Express in Woking wasn't really very nice at all. This was the last straw. And so Buckingham Palace had him booted out of his house, meaning Andy had lost almost everything. But at least on his 66th birthday, he got a free ride in a police car to cheer him up. Only this time, it wasn't going to the Pizza Express in Woking.
That's a cute little video. That's a good little story for Prince Andrew. So that's basically how it went down with Prince Andrew. And the people involved at that level, the monarchy level, are some of the frankly, most nefarious people on the planet. So this picture right here, let me share this all with you. This picture right here is Bill Clinton next to his two attorneys, got an attorney on each side. And this woman right here, her name is Cheryl Mills. Now, if you were around in the 90s and you remember Donald Trump or Bill Clinton's presidency, Cheryl Mills was a fixture. I think she was White House counsel, right? Every politician, every major player in the world has a fixer. They have an attorney that does the lawfare side of things. This is like in the I think it's the movie 1924. Harrison Ford talks about how lawyers are the knights of the modern day. So this is their fixer. And she's sitting here at this deposition where Bill Clinton is being asked questions. But it's interesting to me that she's not the one that's being asked questions. Why is that? Because Cheryl herself is in the Epstein files. Here's an email from GMax, that's Ghislaine Maxwell, to Cheryl Mills. And with these emails, you start at the bottom. It says, you were out shopping for birthday gifts, thought you would like to know that it is my birthday. And then it responds, hey, I'm currently in my bikini. This is Cheryl Mills writing. Or no, this is Ghislaine Maxwell writing to Cheryl Mills, the fixer of Bill Clinton, the former president of the United States. This woman used to be in and out of the White House, okay? I'm currently in my bikini in Palm Beach. I'm not trying to make you jealous or anything. Carol is great. Actually, she may be gone for too long, as she may come in and work with me if my deal goes through. I'm not dumb. It took me so long to make one girlfriend. I'm not prepared to lose her to Osama. And I believe Osama is Obama, because they misspell their names in order to avoid keyword searches when these things get revealed. And then she writes back, Cheryl writes back, is today really your birthday? It's the birthday of one of my greatest friends, and it would not be all surprising that you shared. So happy birthday, darling. I'll have to do a bit of thinking. Hate for you being in Palm Beach. If it weren't your birthday, I'll call you for what you really are for being there. And then she writes back, you did not read down at the bottom of the page. At the bottom, it says December 25th. That's when my B-Day is. And then Ghislaine Maxwell responds, kisses. All right. So Cheryl Mills and Ghislaine Maxwell were on kisses. And then here's one where someone redacted sent to Cheryl Mills. If only you can take a picture, that makes me look good. Thank you. I love you, XO. So Cheryl Mills is on very familiar terms with the people in the Epstein files. Here's the email exchange here, or it was a text. I don't know if it's text or email, whatever it is. I should have read this one. It's easier to read than the document printout. So Cheryl Mills is in there helping Bill Clinton when she herself should probably be asked about, who are you on such familiar terms with? And Bill Clinton, in his deposition, admitted something kind of stunning. It's not surprising, a little bit stunning. During Ms. Maxwell's interview, she stated that President Clinton was her friend, not Epstein's friend. Is that accurate?
I'd say that it was accurate to say that I felt closer to her than to him.
And for the record, why was that?
Because I had seen her more, and because she was very good friends with Evelyn Rothschild and his wife, Lynn, whom I knew and was in regular touch with.
So Bill Clinton knew and was in regular touch with the Rothschilds. Okay. That's not new news, but it's pretty significant. Epstein was closer to Maxwell because she was closer to the Rothschilds. Now, Epstein was the Rothschilds representative. Okay. So Epstein likely Maxwell connected Epstein to the Rothschilds, and Bill Clinton became connected to Maxwell because of his connection to the Rothschilds. There's another president that has connections to the Rothschilds, and the Rothschilds are mainly behind the global banking system and the different monarchies and all that kind of the control grid that sits atop the nation states. Whitney Webb, a renowned researcher, informs us a little bit more about this Rothschild connection.
Bring it back to a question you asked earlier on about, Israel and blackmail. They don't really need blackmail anymore. And I argue at the end of my book that Palantir, Peter Thiel's company, really makes it so that, that's the new Jeffrey Epstein at the end of the day. If they want to blackmail you or know something about you, they just access what Palantir sucked up about you and your search history, your communications, your finances, tweets you've liked in the past, all sorts of things. You don't really need.
So you don't need an Epstein to do the blackmailing to control people. You can just use Palantir. Okay. Who's implementing Palantir at a rapid scale across the United States government? Oh, Donald Trump. Peter Thiel, who's behind that, who's a Donald Trump supporter. Okay. Connections?
Need
turned off-
Epstein in the surveillance era, you know.
Do you think when they said tweets are private, it was just an inducement to get us all to like what we really want to like so they can hold it against us later?
It's possible if they want to hold it against you later. The disturbing thing about Palantir is that it's really about pre-crime. They were the pioneers of predictive policing. You know, they were originally, well, almost everywhere they've piloted predictive policing have been low-income minority neighborhoods, where they decide who's going to commit a crime before they commit it. And that's
And then do
essentially what the, you know, we'll see. Administrative detention, maybe, if we go the Israeli path. But Trump actually in his first term posited this program to stop mass shootings before they happen. That would basically involve going over American social media posts and identifying if they had early warning signs of neuropsychiatric illness based on their, you know, tweets or Facebook posts. And if they were determined by the algorithm to show those warning signs, they could be, you know, placed under house arrest or go to sessions with a court-ordered psychologist and all sorts of things.
Well, some of my extended relatives better be careful because they got some wild Facebook posts. I had to leave the app.
So do a lot of Americans. And it's worth pointing out that a lot of social media companies like Facebook have a lot of ties to Peter Thiel at the same time he was setting up Palantir. And that Facebook has a lot of similarities to a failed DARPA project called LifeLog that arguably Facebook was resurrected into, because Palantir is the resurrection of another DARPA program called Total Information Awareness that was so scandalous when it was announced. It was defunded by Congress, but then they realized that if they turned it into a private company, no one would complain. And that's how we got Palantir.
So that is a clip I did want to play, but it didn't include the point that I needed to have included. So the point here, oh man, that was the beginning of the clip that I needed to play the rest of it. Here's the connection. You just have to believe me on this. She goes on to explain that when Donald Trump went bankrupt in the late 80s, the Rothschilds were a big part of bailing him out. So the connection from Donald Trump to the Rothschilds, the connection to the Clintons, the connection to the Epsteins, Rothschilds are that banking cabal. They're the bankers to the elite, basically, and then, you know, we use their public-facing banks. So there's that connection. There's that connection. What does that mean, right? It's interesting. Bill Clinton was asked about how what he knew about Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. And this is probably, there's two answers he gave. This first one explains how Donald Trump, when, you know, mentions Epstein to Bill Clinton and says they had a falling out.
The Safe at Home Foundation. And it was designed to combat domestic violence, of which Joe Torre had been a victim as a child. And so I wanted to support it. And so then Donald Trump gave him the golf course in New York to have a tournament on. And I played in it a couple of times. And the day I was there, he would typically, Donald Trump would come out and play a few holes with us. And he somehow knew I had flown in Jeffrey Epstein's aircraft, and he said, you know, we had some great times together over the years, but we fell out, all because of a real estate deal. And he said, I'm sorry it happened. That's all.
Do you recall whether President Trump was the first one to affirmatively bring up the subject of Jeffrey Epstein?
No, but I'd be shocked if I did. I just don't do that.
Okay, so the falling out that Donald Trump had with Jeffrey Epstein goes back to the actual purchase of Mar-a-Lago. When Donald Trump purchased Mar-a-Lago, he got into a bidding war with Jeffrey Epstein, and that's when they had their original falling out. Then Donald Trump has the club. Jeffrey Epstein's in the neighborhood. He's a member of the club. So at that point, Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein went from being friendly, maybe going to parties together, social events, elite hobnobbers, buddies, so to speak, to being not on talking. They're not friends. But Mar-a-Lago's a club and Epstein pays his dues, or I think he was mostly a guest, but he's in the neighborhood, right? And then there was the Virginia Giuffre, the hitting on a staffer, and that's when Donald Trump said, never come back, and that was a complete cutoff, right? So from that point forward, there was no contact, but there'd been no friendly, amicable contact since the fallout over the Mar-a-Lago deal. Now, the Democrats asked that question because they wanted to find out what Bill Clinton knew about Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. But then Bill Clinton offered this answer spontaneously on his own. He wanted to clarify something. And I actually listened to this, and I think this is Bill Clinton at the end of his life, because he's not got all the fastballs here. You notice that when you watch the deposition, he's got has to think about it. His attorneys need to fill him in on a few things. Not bad. Doing pretty well for a guy his age, I believe. But anyways, he offers this, and I think this is sincere. He's at the end of his life. He is trying to preserve his legacy. No president is as clean as a whistle. Let's just be frank, right? But I believe that he's telling the truth here.
Oh, I hate this, but because I don't believe I should inject anything.
So he's interjecting. He's going to answer a question that's not being asked.
But I do not want to leave the impression, but since there was no follow-up question, the president never, this is 20-something years ago, never said anything to me to make me think he was involved in anything improper with regard to Epstein either. He just didn't. That's the truth. As I said earlier, the only conversation I had with President Trump about this was in the early 2000s. And I have no information that he did anything wrong. I just want it all out there. I want everybody to get it all out there and let everybody see where we are.
Now, I believe Bill Clinton is a sleazebag dirtball, and I believe he's slept around a lot, and he's probably been with who knows what, okay? Doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. But he's a man who has held the mantle of power, okay? He's also held it, right? He's not seeking it more. He's held the mantle of power, and he understands power, and he understands the transition of power. His wife, on the other hand, never got her chance at power, okay? So she's bitter, resentful, and she's always kind of been the hand up the back of the skirt, so to speak, working with Bill Clinton. And many people think that Bill Clinton was the charismatic vote getter, but she was the mind behind his policies, although they do disagree on policy, believe it or not. So this is Hillary Clinton being asked about the Wiener laptop and some of the files that were on the Wiener laptop. This is, again, bringing back full story. You got the Wiener laptop, you got the Podesta leaks, you have the WikiLeaks, and you have the Epstein files. We don't know everything that's on the Wiener laptop. We just know what the cops said was on the laptop. We know what Eric Prince was told was on the laptop. We know what Sidney Powell was told was on the laptop. So Lauren Boebert asked Hillary Clinton about the, quote, blackmail file and some of the, quote, blackmail that was in the Wiener laptop. She gets asked this question, and somebody proposed this. They said the fact that this question got asked so specifically means they know what they have, okay? Inside government circles, the SCIFs or whatever, this is probably known to certain people. Lauren Boebert asked Hillary Clinton about the blackmail files and Frazzledrip, and look at Hillary Clinton's face.
To the wacky Pizzagate scam.
You could characterize it however you want. I just would like to know if she's familiar with any of them.
So excuse me, your question is about whether or not she has reviewed any emails in the Epstein release files about Pizzagate.
Correct.
So there's one of two things here. She's either looking going, this is ridiculous, I can't believe I have to ask this, or she knows, because she's an attorney, she knows how politics work, she knows how all this works. Get me to say something on the record when I'm under oath, and then later when you come out with the evidence, you can prove I was lying, and I already lied. So her face right there smiling, she knows the game.
Pizzagate was totally made up. It was an outrageous allegation that ended up hurting a number of people, that caused a deranged young man to show up with his assault rifle and shoot up a local pizzeria. I can't believe you're even referencing it.
Now, again, I got the freaking wrong clip. Did I just get it out of order, or did I get the wrong clip completely? Nope, I didn't. Okay, so she was asked about Pizzagate, says it didn't happen. Now, the Pizzagate scandal, right, the Alphonsus Pizza, or James Alphonsus with Comet Ping Pong Pizza, Comet Ping Pong Pizza in, dang it. It is the wrong clip. Okay, the Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria. And so a deranged person, right, went and shot up the pizzeria, shot one bullet right into the computer server, so can't get anything off that server now, then was put in prison for, I think, a couple of years, then got out of prison and was shot by cops on a traffic stop. Just turns out the judge who put him in prison was Ketanji Brown Jackson. So there's like this weird connection in all of it. Okay, she was also asked specifically about Frazzledrip. In fact, I want to get this, I do want to play this, because Frazzledrip. If this ends up coming out, this is going to be absolutely shocking and terrifying. Let's see. Hillary Frazzledrip. There's got to be. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so here is Hillary Clinton being asked about Frazzledrip. This is one of the blackmail videos that was on Wiener's file. And it's rumored that there's basically Hillary Clinton torturing a young girl and actually putting boiling water and peeling her face off. I know it's gross, but she got asked about this. And this is what I was saying. If you get asked about this, it's probably because something is known. Okay. Something is about to come out.
Are you aware of any files that were on Anthony Weiner's laptop in a folder that was titled insurance, life insurance, with a zip file titled Frazzle?
This is way outside the chairman's ruling. This is way within the scope. Is this within the scope, Mr. Chairman?
If the chairman rules that it's not within the scope,
Mr. Chairman, based on what you said in the public hearing, is this within the scope?
We can go off the record for a moment.
Mr. Chairman, is this within the scope?
We'll go off the record and can talk.
They go off the record and talk about it. She asked that question and they lost their minds. Maybe it wasn't in the scope of the hearing, right? Who knows? But Hillary Clinton goes on to basically point the finger at the Trump administration. Now, keep in mind, right, we've had multiple Democrat administrations. This problem's been going on. Only under Donald Trump did Epstein get arrested. Then Biden sat on his hands and the Democrats sat on their hands for 4 years. And then when Trump gets back in, it's release the tapes, release the tapes.
So I don't think it's unfair to say that given the sequencing of the events, starting with the way that President Trump made the release of the files a key element of his 2024 campaign, the promise that he and then his attorney general made that the files would be released, then a walking back of that as they began to look at the files, an ignoring of what they had promised, including that they had a client list on the desk of the attorney general. Reasonable people would have to assume they are engaged in a massive cover-up, which is infuriating. As an American, as a citizen, all of us should be, regardless.
Kind of like a cover-up over the Wiener laptop. Wasn't that a cover-up? I mean, if it's not a cover-up, just release the files, right, Hillary? Right? Of course not.
A party wondering, what are they hiding? And that's why I said in my opening statement, the President of the United States is not above the law and should be, in a setting like this, answering questions under oath, as should others who are prominently featured in the files. And especially the group that is featured after 2008. Because prior to 2008,
like your husband's attorney, Cheryl Mills,
when Jeffrey Epstein pled guilty to the watered down charges that Alex Acosta negotiated and then was rewarded for in the first Trump administration with a cabinet position. there are so many unanswered questions. And I looked at the transcript of the Alex Acosta testimony that was taken before this committee, and I don't think that any Republican members asked him a question. So you have to conclude that there is something rotten in the state of Denmark, or clearly the Justice Department, starting in the White House and at the top with the Attorney General. And this latest example of the missing files about the allegations, and they are absolutely nothing more than allegations, but the FBI interviewed that witness 4 times. You don't interview a non-credible witness 4 times. You don't put into the FBI reporting, protect this source, if you think there is nothing to it. So, of course, I would like to know, like every other American deserves to know, what is in those files and who is going to hold people accountable, because the Justice Department seems to be either unwilling or incapable of doing so.
Now, you could go back and say the same thing about Anthony Wiener, who was married to Hillary Clinton's personal assistant, Uma Aberdeen, who's now married to Alex Soros, and Bill Clinton officiated that wedding. Okay. You could go ask her about what's in those files. Those are actually your missing BlackBerry emails. That's what's on those files. And why did you take a hammer to it in a bleach bit program? Why did you do that? Stuff's happening, guys. It all ties together. The Rothschild connection, the international banking, the quote rules-based order, the different nations pulling off of the petrodollar, Trump trying to reinforce the petrodollar and prop up the dollar, probably going to use stablecoins because you're not going to be able to enforce the petrodollar for too much longer. As Marco Rubio said, 5 years, sanctions won't work anymore. We are in such a transitory time. The only thing we can hold on to is the truth. The truth matters. Why we're doing some of these things has to be rooted in truth. If it's rooted in falsehoods, which I believe I've shown you today, what our involvement in Iran and what we're doing going after China is rooted in falsehood. We're not getting the whole story. We don't know who the stakeholders are. Where do the Rothschilds play in this? They seem to be playing both sides of the field, right? Where does China play into this? I think we have a pretty good idea, but are they fighting against the Rothschilds? Is the Rothschilds our real enemy, or is communism our real enemy? Or is it the same thing? That's the question we have to ask. I would propose that it's pretty much the same thing, okay? It's pretty much the same thing. Javier Milei, we'll finish off with this. He gave a State of the Union speech, or the equivalent down there in Argentina, and it was a rousing speech. Unfortunately, it's in Spanish, so only Pony Boy would understand it. But he said this: "There are moments in history when a nation must choose its future. We have been told that the state is our protector, the bureaucrat is our savior, and the politician knows more than the free man. That we must," unfortunately, the politician seems to lie about what free men actually know, "that we must obey and we must depend. But the truth is another. The world has only 2 types of people: those who live off what others produce, i.e. the parasites. That is you." He's talking to the politicians, the bureaucrats, "and those who produce everything that makes modern life possible. While you draft regulations, we create wealth. While you promise equality, we generate prosperity. While you promise poverty, we multiply abundance. The true battle of our time is cultural, philosophical, and moral. It is to choose the system that lifted millions out of poverty. It is to stop being an immature nation of squanderers that squanders the future to hand out benefits to the present and become a mature nation. Governing with responsibility is governing for the Argentines of today, but also governing for the Argentines of tomorrow." I believe that Donald Trump and Javier Milei are cut of the same cloth. I believe they understand you've got to restore the republic. What that means is restore the election apparatus. And to do that, you've got to take out the enemies that have diluted our vote or eliminated it completely. Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, China. There's a direct connection between all of those. The actions Donald Trump is taking are, in my opinion, the minimal that you would need to take to correct the wrong of a stolen election in an overthrown country. Okay. However, in doing that, we create a narrative. The stuff that gets on Fox News creates a narrative, and that gets in our bloodstream. And if it's based in falsehoods, those falsehoods will just get mirrored back to us again in the future. Just like the CIA who overthrew a country in 1948, fast forward, and we got to experience the same thing. We got to experience what it's like to be overthrown and not be a nation governed by the people and for the people. No private today, guys. I sucked up all of my time, went off almost a full 2 hours. So we will talk to you again tomorrow, and hopefully Ron's feeling better and he'll be with us.